Now let's continue the project that we started in a previous demonstration. We're going to use the Cube Wizard using the top-down design approach. So in Solution Explorer, we'll right-click on the Cubes folder and select New Cube. And on the Welcome page of the wizard, we'll click Next. And on the next page of the wizard, we need to specify a creation method. Now, because we have no data source view in our project already, the option to use existing tables is not available to us. We can either create an empty cube and then manually create all of the objects for our cube, or we can select the option to generate tables in the data source, which is the option that we're going to use here. If we do choose to generate tables in the data source, we can either proceed and fill in the blanks ourselves, or we can use a template based on the AdventureWorks design. We're going to use the None option here. So we'll click Next. And here's where we type in our measure names. So we'll start with sales amount. And we'll provide a measure group. We'll call this reseller sales. And then we need a data type. In this case, sales amount is currency. And then we specify an aggregation function, which is usually the sum function, but you can see that there are others available here. Now we need to continue adding measures to answer the business questions that we reviewed in the introduction module. So to answer those business questions, we also need to include order quantity, and we'll put this in the same measure group. The order quantity will have an integer data type, but it'll be easier to see these data types if we go ahead and expand this window for the wizard. So you can see the various data types here. We're going to use integer, and then again use the sum aggregation function. Our final measure will be product cost, which will have the reseller sales measure group, and this one will also be currency, just like sales amount, and we'll use the sum function here again. So that's it. All of our measures are defined. We'll click Next. And then we define our dimensions. The time dimension is automatically created for us. We can rename it. We can call it date if we like, and we can choose whether we want to support slowly changing dimensions, which in the case of dates usually isn't necessary. We also need to add other dimensions. So to answer our business questions, we need to have a product dimension and a sales territory dimension. The product dimension will be a snowflake dimension. We'll have separate tables for each level of the hierarchies, product, subcategory, and category. And when we're generating tables from our design here, the only way to get separate tables for our snowflake dimension is to actually create the product, subcategory, and category as separate dimensions here. So we'll just create a name for each. And we'll say that we want to support slowly changing dimensions at our product level. So it just adds some additional attributes to our design. Then we'll have subcategory and category. And we don't need to handle slowly changing dimensions at each level, just at the leaf level or the bottommost level of our snowflake dimension. And then we'll have one more dimension called sales territory. When we're done, we just click Next. Now, because we've defined a time dimension, we need to give more information. We need to specify the beginning and the end date to include in our dimension. For this example, we can be consistent with the date ranges that are supported in the AdventureWorks DW database. So we'll specify our earliest date as 2005. And our latest date as 2008. We can specify the first day of the week, and we can also specify which time periods we want to support. So at minimum, we have the date, but we can include month, quarter, and year, as well as other date periods if we like. So here we have a regular calendar, which operates on a January through December basis, but we could specify a fiscal calendar if we wanted to have an alternate calendar. For example, many companies will start their fiscal year in July. There's also support for a reporting or marketing calendar, which has weeks within each quarter organized into different monthly patterns. For example, the first month of a quarter would be a 4-week month, the second month would be a 4-week month, and then the third month would be a 5-week month. And there's also support for a 5-4-4 or a 4-5-4 pattern. Then we have a manufacturing calendar, which essentially has quarters, which basically assigns weeks to quarters, but then allocates the extra periods to a specific quarter. There's also support for the ISO 8601 calendar. What this means is we have dates in our dimension, and they'll roll up into weeks and months and quarters and years as applicable according to these calendars. On the next page of the wizard, we specify which of our dimensions will have a relationship to the measure groups in our cube. If you think in terms of tables, we're essentially creating foreign key relationships between each of these dimensions and the measure groups. So for example, we have date, we're going to store in our fact table. We have product, which we'll store in our fact table, but subcategory and category will not be reflected in the fact table. They'll have a relationship only with the product because they're part of the snowflake dimension structure. And then sales territory will be included in the fact table. So we'll click Next. And we need to give our cube a name. We'll call this Sales. And we have the option to generate the schema now, but we'll wait until we complete the dimension wizard before we start our schema generation. So let's click Finish. And we can see here that we now have a cube, plus we have several dimensions. Now at this point, all we have is a design. We do not have any tables created in our relational source and no data to put into our cube or dimensions.